So without further ado, I would like to welcome Karel Vredenburg. He is going to be one of our speakers, and I'm most looking forward to his talk on design thinking and change leadership. So we're going to be looking at the intersection of design thinking and leading change. Actually, I'm looking forward to all of our speakers because they bring a unique perspective. And for today, we are going to be going behind the scenes with Carl, and I have my fast five questions that will help us get a little bit of, behind the scenes of what Carol is really about. And so, Carol, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conference as well.
Carol, before I go into my fast five questions that I have for you, because in our fast five, we're going to learn quite a bit about you, and I'm looking forward to just knowing you beyond what we see every day. But just to give some context, could you please introduce yourself to our audience? What do you do?
Yeah, so Karel Vredenburg is how I pronounce that collection of letters, for those of you who are looking at the lower third. So I am currently Global Vice President of UX Research across IBM. So my teams have responsibility for really understanding and deeply empathizing with the people that we are trying to serve, our clients, the users of our clients and the like, and then working with product management and design and engineering to make sure that we build what it is that our clients and our users want.
Thank you for that context. And I actually met Carol through the Directors College. He was teaching a program on the Directors College, and he was talking about design thinking, and everything he was saying was so resonating. And I said, Carol, I dropped him a message quickly. I said, Carol, we have to have you at the Change Leadership Conference because leading change is all about working with people. So when you talk UX design, it's very user centered. And I believe that's the future. Any change we want to do is really going to be about being people focused and how do we bring people on board. So really excited about your topic at the conference. So outside of the topic of your conference, which we're going to come back to at the end, the first thing I want to ask you is, as part of my fast five questions, is your first job. So many times we see Carol and you have this great title, you're at IBM, you're the global lead. But they say success is never overnight. Even though it seems like, oh, they just got there very quick. It took you, steps to get to where it is that you are. So what I want to know is, what was that very first job that you had?
So this is a theme, by the way, that I've been writing about and talking about recently in the last couple of months or so. So you can also look at karelvredenburg.com and read all the details. But the first roles that I like to talk about were nothing to do with what I'm doing here. And so my early jobs were actually being a farmhand and doing everything from baling hay and the like. And then I did all kinds of jobs other than physician and nurse in a hospital. The janitor was a role that I particularly enjoyed, but also realized that janitors are largely invisible. People don't think they see them as part of the furniture. And so what did I learn from all of those? That I think that people that are doing physical labor are incredibly important to our whole society. And also, I think that we need to recognize, no matter what our role is, how important everybody is to the running of any organization. And then I did a stint as a musician for a while. Basically did every Saturday night, played at a club, and that's what I wanted to make my career. And then I decided not to do that when I was going to go and do a bachelor's degree in music. And my then high school teacher said, you know what, if you go do that, you're not going to be performing a lot of the time. You're going to be teaching a lot of the time, and you're going to be listening to a lot of bad music. So he said, you know what, make music your avocation and make something else your primary one. So I did work in psychology initially, then clinical psychology, and then cognitive science, and then pivoted to design and research. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am today. Well, that's part of the story.
And we're going to get into that bit, but I'm a little bit curious, so I'm in the driving seat, so you're gonna
Yeah,
have to
go for it.
allow me. Do you still do music?
I do, although I inspired my kids to do a lot of music, so they now do more music than I do. I'm rather busy at the time, but yeah, I do occasionally still do music. I would love to do more.
Okay, awesome. And just such a rich background,
Mhm.
working on the farm, janitor, music. And it just, I love what you say about every role being important. And that's when we think about society, everybody plays a key role.
Mhm.
It's easy to often look at certain positions as critical. And yes, some may seem critical, but without one or the other, this can lead to a breakdown. So we all have critical roles we're playing in the
Mhm.
society. And then, so my next question to you is, what would you say was the single most profound turning point in your career trajectory?
Probably had a few, but
Hmm.
I think the most significant one to what I ended up doing was getting a phone call um, after I did a presentation at a conference about some research that I did at the university as part of my PhD program, and which was looking at gender differences in using computers and how we could change the design of products to make them more amenable and enjoyable by then both genders. And got a call saying, "Have you ever thought of working for IBM?" And I honestly
Mm.
said no. But I did read a a book about the founders of IBM about a year previous to that, and I said, "You know what? I love the culture of the company. I'll come in for an interview." Had the interview, saw the facility, and it was so much better than the lab that I had at the university, because at the time I was looking to be an academic. And then we started talking about salary, and that was a whole lot better than the academic salary. I said, "Look, I'm going to give this a go for a year," and that's now translated into 35 years actually at the same company. So,
Wow. 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 And what has made you stay in an organization for 35 years? Because these days, I'm sure you would agree with me that people don't stay long in organizations. It's very rare. So why 35 years at IBM?
well, first of all, it's a huge place, and
Hmm.
so you can pivot through any number of roles. And I've loved every single role that I've had.
Hmm.
Pretty well all of them. I made up myself, and I got to do the work that I really wanted to do. I've been hunted lots of times, heavily about a year and a half ago, and decided no, I really think I still am devoted to really making this company successful. When I wrote a blog post when I was with the company for 35 years, which was all of like 2 weeks ago or so, and
Hmm.
I made that point actually, Yvonne, that you know why did I not celebrate any of the other milestones through my career?
Mm,
Partly because yes, the industry I'm in, you want to be moving between companies every 2 years because everybody puts X this, X that in their LinkedIn profile, for example. So it's staying at a company isn't seen to be the cool thing to do in terms of this industry. I happen to have thoroughly enjoyed it. I also said that it's also the case that um, gray hairs are not common in the industry I'm in either, and I know that of all the isms, ageism is still
mm,
active, and so I basically didn't say anything about that. But when I really leaned in and realized that this has been a really fulfilling career, and I'd like to encourage more people to not necessarily
mm,
have to hop between companies, but even try to develop their career further inside a company as well. And a company like IBM affords that because if you
mm,
want to go in to do some consulting, you go to the consulting organization. You want to do something internal, you go to our CIO organization. If you want to do any number of technologies from quantum to AI to any of those areas are opportunities for anybody working in IBM. So that's why I've been here for that long.
mm. You say two things that jump out at me, and I respect the first one of them, which is that you've created some of these roles
Mhm.
that you found yourself in. And I like that because it just demonstrates even being a change leader. You're leading and driving change. You're seeing opportunities. You're being proactive. One of
Right.
the skills that I talk about that is very important for change leaders is your ability to be proactive and agile. So seeing that opportunity and creating a role for yourself, it just goes to show the value of being a change leader, even in your own career, when you embody it. So I love that. But one question I like to dig deeper into with you is that you say it seems to be maybe the nice thing for people. People tend to be proud of job hopping, but are
Mhm.
people really job hopping because they desire to job hop, or is it just a case of that's the environment we find ourselves now? When you look at some of the tech industries, there are layoffs, there are constantly changes within organizations, and then people are just really looking for that better opportunity. And sometimes that better opportunity is outside of the organization. And not every organization is as large as IBM for people to, look
Right.
for the right opportunity internally. So what would you say to, you know, those set of people, like, which is there any which is better? What are your thoughts on that?
I Yeah, I've always had the view that if you're going to be working for a company, you should apply the knowledge you have to make the changes that are necessary. And a lot of the time,
Mm,
people will be unhappy with a company and say, "Oh, I'm just going to bolt. I'm going to go." It's bound to be the grass is bound to be greener elsewhere. A lot of the time,
mm,
you find that's not the case anyway. But then they have now made
mm,
the move. My personal view is that when I was hired 35 years ago, I was actually hired to change the company. They
mm.
didn't actually tell anybody else, though, that was my role. At the time, the IBM company was going to be split up into smaller companies, and so I was in the Canadian part of the company. It was going to be its own software company, and so they wanted to make sure that design and research were, front and center to the work they were doing. So I took that on in terms of actually talk about change agent, really transforming the place that I still sit today.
Mm,
And then that was very successful. And then was asked to do that for all the software part of the business. And after
mm,
that, I was asked to do it for all of IBM. And so, and then at that time, I actually had what was really the equivalent of an internal startup. I was internally funded. I went around to each of the business units for the funding for my team. I had about 30 people at the time. And we led design and design transformation, the tooling to support it, and the like for a number of years. And
mm,
then about 10 years ago, we wanted to really amp up the design and research function in IBM. And we got a brand new CEO in the person of Ginny Rometty, who's amazing. And she basically said that we wanted to introduce really a new culture of design and design thinking around the company. And so,
mm,
um, fairly recently, at that point, Phil Gilbert was a leader for an acquisition company that came in, and he had a real startup mentality. And he and I and a few others really launched another big transformation that we did over the last 10 years. We also hired some 3,000 designers, changed the way the whole company worked. But I take real pride in not only seeing a problem and then leaving, but
mm,
really seeing a problem and then doing what I can to actually transform and address the problem. And I'm doing one right now. We're transforming a major part of the company in the way that it works, and it's just thrilling. I mean, is it
mm.
hard? Yeah, but I love hard stuff like that. But that's the
Yeah.
difference. The perspective I take is I want the challenge to make the change rather than bolting when when the going gets tough.
And Carol, what I'm hearing is that you came into IBM not with a job title. You came in with a mindset of change. You came in
Mhm.
with your role to be a change leader, to be a change catalyst, to be a change agent. And that's what you still find yourself doing 35 years ago. It's not, so the titles may have changed, but you as a person, in terms of what your desire, your goal and outcome was to be that change leader, that change catalyst, and that change agent, and you're still doing what it is that you love. And that's a whole different mindset when we go into an organization looking to do what we love versus just
Hmm.
looking at that title. Because now more than ever, the role with the new world of work, everything is changing. It's no longer about titles. It's really about
Yeah.
what it is you can do in that organization versus what it is that you're being called to do, because it's flatter now. You know, there's no set role. What you were brought into for one title may change tomorrow. The question is, can you adapt to that change? Are you agile? Are you proactive? So thank you for sharing that real, life example with us. And if anybody's listening, you right now, whether the replay or you're live, again, drop us an emoji and drop a question for Carol, and we will ask that question live. And Carol will still come back if you've missed the live version of the program. So, Carol, my next question on my Fast Five takes us
Hmm.
into, what would you say is which single area in the workplace do you think would be most disrupted by 2025? So I'm putting on that future hat,
Hmm.
making you a futurist right now.
Hmm.
What single area in the workplace do you think would be most disrupted by 2025? That's just around the corner, really.
Right, right. Yeah. No, I think everything needs to transform, quite frankly. I think that there are parts of the company, sure, that may transform more, but I've always believed that every part of an organization, I should share with you as well my mental model for, even if you're working in a large company. I always imagine that my team is like a startup, and
Mm,
we have investors, and the
mm,
investors are our senior vice presidents, and that we always have to think about, just like you would if you were a startup, because you're going to go out of money and not be successful unless you constantly think about, how could we make this more effective? How could we make that more effective, and really ramp
mm,
up? And that includes, further automating activities if we have the capabilities for doing that technically, but then also pivoting the work of everybody, like on my team, in the most optimal way that leverages their skills, their experience, their interests, to make a substantial difference in the company. And also to, and the key point too is, you can't do it with only one group. The key
mm,
to real success is everybody working more closely together. And so my
mm,
researchers need to be working really closely with our product managers. And if that is not happening, then the work we're doing is not going to get into the products that need to
mm,
be informed by the research we're doing. So I think that it's a mistake to think about that there would be only one part of a company, if you're going to make a company more successful, that needs to change. I think that it's really seeing, and even a company our size, to really think about, how does each one of these roles and each employee actually look at how they can further optimize what it is they're doing as well with
mm.
others.
Yeah, I love that, and even before this startup concept became like startup, mindset, one of the things that I would look for when recruiting employees was people who had an entrepreneurial
Right.
mindset. So that of having an entrepreneur mindset, but within a workplace environment, because
Hmm.
those are the people that go for it. They're proactive, they're agile, they make things happen, they're open-minded. So so now we can just really picture, have something more visual to think about it, which is that startup mindset we
Hmm.
talk about. So still on that question, you said you get your team to work closely. What does closely mean? Because closely at one point meant we're in the same workplace, we're sharing the same workspace, and
Hmm.
now it's all about remote, and there's that
Right.
struggle at the moment between coming back into the office versus I do my best work when I'm at home versus we need to collaborate together, and sometimes which is right, so when you say closely, what does closely look like for you? How do you define that?
Great question. And I've also written about this, by the way. There's some blog posts on this as
you
well.
know
That there's a
Carol, I'm going to get
Yeah.
all the links and drop it in the chat
Okay.
after the
Okay. Okay.
conversation, so for sure.
It's
You
really
just
simple. It's
go
just my
try.
first name last name.com.
Yes,
We'll get to it.
the specific
But
links,
let's get
all
into
of
this.
it.
When you think about it, we've looked at modes of work, and
Mm,
that some modes of work are optimal for working by yourself as and not with any distractions. There's other modes of work where you really need to be collaborating, and ideally collaborating in person. And I think that what the pandemic really taught us is that we can work remotely, but we don't necessarily have to be working remotely all the time. And so the whole point, my own, again, mental model of how this works optimally is and this is how it works with my teams as well, that I think that spending, a couple of days working from home, and you don't have to, but if you really wanted to, if you really wanted to be focused, and that you want to take certain work that is optimal for doing that way and in that kind of environment, that's cool. I think
Mhm.
doing some, 3 days in a workplace where others, collaborating with others, but then realizing as well, I don't know how many other teams are like this, but certainly our teams at IBM, we always have teams that are remote. They're even
Mm.
when they're in the office, they're remote. So we're doing, WebEx is what we use. WebEx calls all the time as well. So that it's virtually impossible to only work in a studio together with the other designers and researchers because we're global, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that what the whole notion is somewhat simplistic in our case, of saying that everybody just be working together in one location,
Mm.
because we don't have anybody that works that way. But I think there's still huge advantages to being in person, where you can be with a subset of the teams. And I like to try to organize my teams that way too, so that there's
Mhm.
enough people that when they come into the office or into the studio, in our case, they can work collaboratively and get a lot of benefit from working that way,
Mhm.
rather than just being in a building that happens to have
Yes.
IBM as a logo on it, right? So I think
Mhm.
that's where we're going with a lot of this. I come into the office because I prefer to, um, pretty well every day. Some of the time, if I've got to really be, heads down. I had a very early call this morning with India and some other locations around the world, so I did that from home. But I think it really is trying to optimize for the modes of work, and then also realizing that we need interpersonal connection a lot of the time. And even
Mhm.
when we say, "Oh, I would prefer to work full time from home the whole time," there are instances where you really need to, and there's benefits to kind of the serendipitous interactions. Like I go to we actually have a water cooler here, and we also have a coffee machine. The coffee machine is a lot more popular, but I'll come across somebody and have an impromptu conversation with them that
Yes.
ended up being phenomenally important. But you
Mm.
don't get that if you're only on scheduled, WebEx or Zoom calls.
Yes, it's a whole different dynamic. Yeah. We've spoken about, single most important, the single area that may be disrupted by 2025. But right now
Hmm.
we have something that is disrupting. And
Hmm.
AI has been around forever, since, it's been around. It's nothing new. But suddenly, it seems suddenly, like as we said, there's nothing like overnight, but it just seemed like
Hmm.
overnight, there's a sudden buzz around AI because of ChatGPT. With the conference, we've been talking about AI,
Hmm.
since like 2017,
Hmm.
and robots and fourth industrial revolution. But in the last few months, it's ChatGPT is just being at the news headlines. What are your thoughts on the buzz around ChatGPT at the moment? I know you're using ChatGPT. I read your
Hmm.
article that you
Yeah.
co-wrote with GPT. So I'm not going to ask you if you're using it. I know you've used it. But what are your
Hmm.
thoughts around AI and ChatGPT?
I think it's honestly really exciting. I mean, IBM sort of founded this whole direction, right? We won the Jeopardy game
Yeah, I
some
remember
years.
that.
So AI has been foundational to the DNA of the IBM company, and so we do it for most of our work is business to business, and so
Mhm,
our level of AI has to always be accurate, also
mhm,
has to be ethical, and
mhm,
has to be trustworthy. And
mhm,
this new direction that's about 6 months old now. I mean,
mhm,
all of our various companies, Google, Microsoft, IBM, we've all been working in this large language model space,
mhm,
um, for a long time. But now that it's broken out as a general, anybody can go and try ChatGPT, it's now got this huge, buzz as well.
Mm,
I think it comes with some dangers because it's sucking up everything out there. I also did I asked ChatGPT if it knew about my brother, and it said that my brother died in 2016. He's very alive, but that doing a query like that, if that were our AI system, that would be disastrous. That kind of a mistake,
mm,
right? And so that's the danger, of it. But I think that what we do at IBM is the really trustworthy and ethical and accurate
mm.
AI. And so that's where I really hope that there's going to be more direction on this topic. But I still worry about the open access sort of chat GPT work as well. But I have to admit, I use it all the time for things like I'm vegan and I like to find really interesting vegan recipes. And it's really good as
Mm.
a recipe author as well. And there's lots of benefits to, the generative AI approaches. I think we just need to be careful how we actually use them. And I think there are, dangers that we need to counter. But at the same time, we've said that about every other major technology, pivot. That when the World Wide Web came out, it was sort of like, oh my God, this is going to be disastrous. In some ways, it has, but there's also been huge benefit, right? And same thing with the printing press when that came out. It was like, oh, the end of the world is going to come. So I think that we've always had that there's a major shift in technology, but I think we need to be careful to really guide it and put
Yes.
guardrails around it and the like.
Yes.
But I'm excited for the positives, and I know that our company certainly is going to be focusing on, like I said, the ethical, trustworthy, and really reliable AI that doesn't make the kind of mistakes that ChatGPT does. And it also said that I was retired, by the way, and I'm definitely not retired. So
I play around with ChatGPT. I don't know what I'll do without ChatGPT. Honestly, it's become one of the employees on my team, to be quite
right.
honest. So I'm ready to pay ChatGPT a salary just to have it around. So ChatGPT is it for me. And when we talk about pivots or technology pivots that have really moved us in a different direction, can you imagine that calculators, people had protests around calculators, carrying placards around not to
Yeah,
bring calculators into schools?
very
And
true.
now calculators, there's a calculator on every phone,
Yes.
type of thing. So it's just interesting that how technology changes everything, and the initial resistance
Hmm.
towards technology and then the adoption. But I'm very much with you that, with AI and how powerful that it is, the guardrails need to be there. So just as much as we have people who are developing AI
Hmm.
and solutions, we need to have as much people who are focused on the ethical part of it, and the government, the policies, all of that also need to play a role. And we need the public sector, the public or the government, to move as quickly as the people who are developing this, to make
Hmm.
it, to put in the right guardrails there, so thank you for that. So my fifth question is, tell us, what are you most looking forward to sharing and discussing at the Change Leadership Conference on May 31st? I was so glad when when after listening to you and I saw you in Toronto, I was like, oh my gosh, Carol is in Toronto. That was really exciting. So, to be able to invite you to be part of the conference. So tell us, what are you most looking forward to?
Well, I'm partly looking forward to also getting together with you and the other speakers that you're going to have. I find that often at conferences, I get as much out of the conversation with people at the conference than getting feedback on what I'm presenting. But I'm also looking forward to actually sharing my fairly considerable experience at Transformation and the core elements of this designerly thinking, which is really the design thinking kind of approach. Realizing that most people, like I said, when you were in the director's college class with me, where I say that most of what organizations do with regard to design thinking is innovation theater, not actually using it effectively. You got to do appropriate UX research first. You got to understand, and then you need to use the methods to workshop and like, but really make a difference as well. And I am convinced that and I just did another session on Saturday of the Directors College, and we had 4 teams working through real challenges, and sort of each one of them are now going to take real change back to their organization based on
Mm,
these sets of methods and the like. And so I look forward to sharing that kind of lesson as well with the audience at the
mm.
conference.
Yes. And one of the things I love about design thinking is that at the core of it is people.
Hmm.
Having how do we work with people? And also the core of design thinking is around collaboration. And there isn't any way that we can effectively lead change without the people, without the behavior, mindset, and without the collaboration. So many things that make for a great change leader or change leadership skills can be found in design thinking as well. So, really looking forward to having you at our session at the conference. And I'm so excited that I got to connect with you one on one. And the audience, anybody listening to this conversation, also gets to connect with you one on one and hear your story, starting off as a janitor and a farmer and dabbling into a little bit of music and
Hmm.
now you know being a global leader in IBM and doing UX and still loving to have your water cooler conversation, so that's been really great, learning more behind the scenes, so thank you so much, Carol, for joining me on this LinkedIn Live one-to-one and our other platforms. And I look forward to meeting you in person on May
Hmm.
31st. And for anybody who wants to learn more about the conference, I will drop the link in the comment section after this. It's thechangeleadership.com. And I will also be dropping the link for Carol's blogs. And he writes quite a few blogs. You can see his co-written blog with ChatGPT about his career as well, and even remote working, insightful articles there. So I will drop the link as well. Thank you so much, Carol. And see you all soon. See you on Tuesday. I'll be back on Tuesday with another LinkedIn Live session. So be sure to join us. And see you all. Bye for now, everybody.
Thanks so much.